Now look, there's a ton of motorcycle laws on the books, but there are some that are so outdated and ridiculous, I think that all riders should break them. And that's what we're going to look at today, 7 motorcycle laws that are absolutely ridiculous. And in doing research for this video, I found one specifically that can actually get you a misdemeanor for riding your bike and doing something at the same time that we've all been guilty of at one point or another. Some of these you probably caught yourself up in as well. And I'd love to hear those stories. Actually, all of us would, to be totally honest with you. Let me know the most ridiculous thing you've ever gotten pulled over for, or ever known somebody to get pulled over for, or even ticketed for while riding their motorcycle. Let me know down below. Let's go ahead and jump right in. Let's start with one that is a common misconception and actually is still ticketable in some areas. Now, I never really thought about this until I went out to Sturgis last year. And I kept hearing everybody say, including my buddy that I went with, hey, you got to put both feet down at every single stop sign in the town of Sturgis specifically. So on Main Street right there, you have a series of stop signs, a bunch of stop signs, right? They make sure that they keep you inside of that, I think it's 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. It's really slow. And what's interesting, and something that you never, almost never see people do, is putting both feet down. And yet, while I was there, I noticed that everybody was doing it. Now, I looked it up specifically to see if Sturgis has a 2-foot down law or whatever on the books, and they don't. They do say you have to come to a complete stop. And these fines can range from like $54 up to $130 something. Unfortunately, it's one of the problems in Sturgis, in my opinion. This city generates, in 2022, they did a study that showed they got, $750,000 just in Sturgis. When you start over-policing it, writing tickets, towing motorcycles, we saw that a lot this past year, you start to deter people away from there. I definitely don't want to see that. I know they don't want to see that. So it is a kind of a problem for sure, but I understand you gotta stop. Okay, we all get it. But using both feet actually makes you less stable. And the more weight you have on the motorcycle, it actually exacerbates this issue. When you start putting one foot down and using the other and covering that rear brake, you have so much more stability when you come to a stop. And you're riding that rear brake pretty much all the way to the stop. I forget who I was watching, but I remember, Robert kind of drilled this into my head when I went to his, training course, that covering that rear brake and the stability you gain from it at slow speeds. You're talking about upping your confidence. On a heavy cruiser especially, you can up your confidence by 20% just by putting some pressure on the rear brake when you come to a stop. It may sound counterintuitive because you're like, man, I got a heavy bike, dude. How am I going to stop with one leg? How am I going to keep this bike up with one leg? You don't have to stand there the whole time and, struggle, especially if you have a passenger and gear and all that kind of stuff. But just coming to that stop makes it so much smoother, more predictable. If your passenger shifts a little bit, it gives you a little bit of wiggle room there in case maybe you have a piece of gravel or a patch of gravel, patch of sand, something like that. It really helps with that stability a little bit to just help you come to a smoother stop. It really does work. This is one that I break all the time. I would break it any and everywhere because it is absolutely ridiculous to put both feet down during a stop. Now you're only relying on your front brake, which is way more sensitive and way more unstable. I would never follow this one. Now here's one I had never heard of. I can't even believe it's a real thing, but it absolutely is. It is illegal to fill up your own vehicle at a gas station in New Jersey. Still to this day, and it was just repealed, fully repealed actually, back in 2023 or 2024 out in Oregon, even though Oregon says that in rural areas, they still have to have a 50% gas attendant percentage there. So they slowly eased off in Oregon to allow self-serving. But it's kind of interesting because when I looked up the story, I found this kind of brilliant entrepreneur, Irving Reingold, who started his own self-serve gas station. And it was kind of a brilliant move. And so he was able to slash prices. And his competition not only politically came after him, but violently came after him as well, which led to that ban. This is back in 1949, and it's still ongoing. And of course, they cite public safety, fire hazards, and just like a lot of things in New Jersey, just an overall distrust in people being able to be free, right? They regulate everything up there. It's really weird, man. But I'm from the South, and so when I see laws like this, it just kind of makes me roll my eyes because I'm like, dude, what else can they regulate up there for these people? And it's not like we're talking about a different country, right? These are Americans, but I don't want to get sidetracked here too much. But again, it's all in the name of public safety. While in 48 other states, right, people handle this, pretty good. Would it be nice every once in a while to still have, attendants at the gas stations to do it for you? Sure, I guess. But when it comes to motorcycles, man, people are very particular, and there's a reason, because the chance of getting splash up from inside of the tank, they're shallower tanks, of course, so you can be as careful as you want to and fill your tank up on your motorcycle and still tend to get spillage every once in a while. There's little things that we do, like for instance, I'll take my fuel cap off, not now, unfortunately, because my bike doesn't have a removable one. But on my other bikes, I would take the fuel cap off, obviously, fill it up, and then turn the fuel cap over, put the nozzle down in there, carry it over, hang it back up, boom, be good to go without getting any kind of spillage. But are these gas station attendants going to take that much care for your motorcycle? The chances are slim. You have to be careful in cars too, by the way, because they'll tend to, top them off, right? You're supposed to just stop. As soon as that pump stops, you're supposed to stop filling because you have a evap canister, purge valves, right? Those actually trap vapor, gas vapor. So when you eliminate that vapor and you just fill it straight up with gasoline, that liquid can then get into those evap canisters and actually clog that system. It's not a cheap fix. Nothing on cars is cheap now. So it is something that you want to consider, man. And I don't know that you can necessarily break it. I mean, I've seen where they have fines ranging from $50 to $250 for your first offense and then $500 or more for subsequent offenses. I don't know. You guys that deal with that up in New Jersey, tell me how it works for you. Maybe it's a great service. Maybe you're so happy you have it. But I know a lot of motorcyclists, a lot of bikers would not want to have somebody else touching their bikes. If you spill gas on your own bike, fine. But somebody else doing it, I could see some problems arising from that. Fortunately, most of us in the States don't have to worry about this. Now here's one that's not necessarily a law, but it can get you into a lot of trouble, and that is not using your front brakes in corners. And of course, what I'm talking about is trail braking. I learned this technique out in Las Vegas. I never really got the concept of it until Kyle Wyman explained all of it perfectly. And if these guys are using it, the best riders in the world, then I'm going to use it as well. And the way he put it was kind of brilliant because it's seen as an advanced technique, which, you got to practice all this stuff, right? But still, it should be taught in beginner courses. Because what happens is, especially on curvy roads, you get into a position where you have a decreasing radius turn. You get into these moments where you think you've slowed down enough, you're going through the turn, and then you have this holy crap moment, I'm running wide. Trail braking helps to eliminate a little bit of that. So you're keeping constant light pressure on the front brake, and you're letting off of that front brake just a little bit as you can see the exit of your corner, or even just a regular turn. It allows you to turn in a little bit quicker. So you'll notice how you'll have people kind of riding you and come up super quick on you when you're turning into just a neighborhood sometimes. This will help you to turn into that corner a little bit quicker while also keeping more of a contact patch on your tires, giving you a little bit better grip. Now you're trading off some of the cornering grip and that braking grip. So you don't want to overload the tires, but since you already have a load on the front forks and on the tire itself, it's already compressed. As you start to lean more and you start to trail off of the brakes, it allows you to get sharper, cleaner turns. If you have an unexpected corner creasing radius, if you have an unexpected patch of gravel, sand, you're already slightly on the brakes, so it's going to hopefully kick off that instinct to just grab, right, which is a bad idea, but instead just slowly pull that brake back, straighten up the bike, boom, you're good to go. There's people out there on the internet, there's certain videos that you can look up that explain it way better than I do. The point is, this could be a life-saving technique. So definitely get out there and practice that. It's something you can practice in a parking lot too, right? You don't have to necessarily go on the tail of the dragon to practice this technique for the first time. The biggest thing is light brake pressure, more contact patch, tighter turns, more control, more stability, and you're just letting off as your lean increases. That load on that tire can handle a lot of things, but it doesn't want to handle any one thing abruptly, and so you're kind of combining everything. As you lean more, you brake a little less. Life-saving technique that everybody should learn from pretty much day one. Now here's one that won't take much time because I think you'll see why it's instantly ridiculous. And that is, some states say it's illegal to use your hazards only while you're parked or on the side of the road in the emergency lane. I'm sorry, but I am not going to preserve the purity of this code when you're in a heavy downpour. We already suffer from lower visibility. Other cars already say they can't see us, and there have been studies that actually back this up. Unfortunately, way smaller profile. A lot of drivers, they either don't care, they're distracted, they're not used to seeing motorcycles, they're not looking out for you. Whatever the case is, we already are at a huge disadvantage. Then you have a huge downpour. And the first things I'm gonna do, if I'm thinking about it, of course, is turn on those hazards. I mean, even in a vehicle, this is a good idea, especially when you have really low visibility, even in fog. Anything that can bring more attention to you, I believe, is a good thing. This goes for headlights too, right? They say, oh, don't ride with your brights on. I don't really do this anymore because I have a bike that is well lit, LEDs, all that kind of stuff. But when I used to ride around on my Sportster all the time, I used to always keep the brights on. During the day, of course. I'm sorry, but those little halogens are not going to be blinding people in freaking Tahoes and Explorers and everything else with headlights that are seriously blinding, especially at night. If you have astigmatism, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Point is, anything to bring more visibility, in my opinion, is going to be safer for the motorcyclist. There's other things you can do for sure when it comes to clothing, lighting, all of that kind of stuff, but turning your hazards on, that's a free way for hopefully somebody to see, hey, I'm on the road too here. Here's a law we've all broken a time or two, and that is speeding. Every single state has speed limits. Okay, fine. I'm not telling you to do some criminal amount of speed or triple digits or anything like that. But sometimes 5, 10 miles an hour, even 10 miles an hour sometimes is not fast enough to keep up with the flow of traffic. Because the problem is, and data from the NHTSA actually shows that in mixed traffic, right, where traffic's flowing, slower vehicles actually get rear-ended more often. You can actually put yourself in more danger by going slower than the flow of traffic. To me, this is one that you have to make a judgment call on, right? But I'm gonna go with the flow, not necessarily faster than everybody else, even though sometimes that's the right thing to do as well. Sometimes getting ahead of the pack just a little bit, keeping kind of a airbag of protection around you and the other vehicles, just having that little bit of space is kind of all the airbag you need sometimes just to get away from some of these drivers. Again, you get in their blind spot for just a quick second. How many people just turn on a blinker and come right over into you? Of course, these fines can range from $100 to $500 to criminal amounts of speed. Will you get singled out if a cop decides to pull one of y'all over when you're going with the flow of traffic? There's a possibility. It's one of those calculated risks, I guess you can say, at least keeping up with the flow of traffic. But again, I always like to keep a buffer between the cars behind me and the cars in front of me whenever I can. It just feels like a good idea, but definitely not being the slowest one. Having drivers constantly come up on you. Again, visibility is a huge thing. Sometimes it's better to go over the speed limit than to stay right at it. Now here's one that's very interesting. Caught me off guard. It's absolutely true. And I think that 99.9% of motorcyclists would go to jail if it was actually enforced. But in Maryland, there is a law that says you cannot use profanity on your motorcycle, a car, whatever, within earshot of a street or sidewalk. Now, technically, this is a misdemeanor. On paper, I guess you could actually go to jail for this. Like I said, it's rarely, if ever, enforced. But this is kind of based on like some of the old morality clauses, essentially, to help keep the peace. But let's be honest, sometimes certain gestures and the use of stronger communication is needed to get your point across because drivers do stupid things. Now, I'm not saying you should road rage at every little thing. I'm not saying that at all, but we are all guilty of this. And if they actually enforce this, like I said, pretty much everybody would be behind bars. And the last one that we're going to talk about is you are too old to ride. Now, apparently in Idaho Falls, if you're 88 or over, you can no longer ride a motorcycle. I found this one through Law Tigers. They were talking about this, and I assume that is a joke, right? Somebody just kind of passed it along through generations. I don't know, actually, because I couldn't find an origin. I couldn't really even find where anybody has ever been prosecuted for something like this. But weirdly enough, it continues to come up as I was doing some more research for some of these silly motorcycle laws that are meant to be broken. And look, you know, when it comes to older drivers, right, we'll just kind of talk broadly about older drivers. It gets to a point where your eyesight, your reaction time, all of that kind of stuff, for a lot of older people, it just isn't there anymore. I know my grandfather, he's well into his 70s, almost 80 years old, and he looks good, still rides. I mean, he's just still, you know, really sharp. I hope to be that sharp when I'm that age, right? So it really, I guess it just depends on who you are. I mean, a lot, you know, your genetics has a lot to do with it, how you treat your body when you're younger too. So it's really hard to put an age limit on driving or riding a motorcycle. And while I can understand, you know, to some extent, some older people just shouldn't be on the road, let's be honest, there's some younger drivers that should have had to have taken their tests maybe a couple more times before they actually passed it. I don't know if it's real or some kind of obscure joke, but I thought it was interesting enough to put in here. I'd love to hear about some of the obscure or weird motorcycle laws that you've heard of, or even ones that you've been cited for. Leave those stories down below. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. See you in the next one, and as always, hold them down.